My friends, we have made it. NFL football is just a couple days away, and this is the one episode a year where I can focus exclusively on the game that I love. So, let's talk about it. Welcome everyone to Outsider Information. I am Brandon. This time, not today, I am not with OYAS. I am a fan because this is the one episode a year where I focus exclusively on the NFL. I don't draw any real organizational ties to it. I don't try to make any comparisons to external organizations. I just get to focus on the sport that I love. So, if anything resonates, as always, give a like, subscribe, and engage, not just here, but other aspects in social media. And if you are curious about the OYAS stuff, check out the website as well. Drink of the episode is a classic green tea, because if we are going to go back to our roots, we need something to pair with it that's going to stand the test of time. All right, I'm pumped. I am pumped because football is back. I am wearing my Jets green, and I approach really all of this not necessarily as a fan. There is some scientific lean to it. I look at the patterns, I look at trends, you look at everything that happens throughout the offseason. Usually when I do anything NFL related, there is a parallel to an external organization, to the labor, right? When we've talked about contract negotiations. But this is none of that. This is purely what I think could be happening over the course of an NFL season, and it's not supposed to be inflammatory, right? This is not about creating hot takes for clicks. Again, there is some substance, hopefully, that's going to come with this, and especially after what we saw over the weekend on Saturday with all the college football games, people are prone to overreacting. We just need to chill. So again, there is a lot of this. It's going to be rooted in trends and patterns from previous seasons, historical context, a little bit of science that we're going to try to toss in there, but most of this is speculative. So we are all just going to have to see what happens. And that is the best part, because from Thursday until sometime in February, it's going to be all football. And that makes me happy. All right. So let's dive right in. We're going to start out with a few storylines that I think are going to be the really important ones to pay attention to throughout the season. When I do a dive into a lot of organizations, the context is rooted in ownership, right? Top of the food chain, coaches who shape the culture, and the quarterbacks. And that is where we are going to start. All right, so 3 quarterback situations that are definitely going to be worth paying attention to are the Colts, the Browns, and the Saints. And they are all for separate reasons. All right, so the Indianapolis Colts, big swing and a miss with Anthony Richardson. I touched on this in one of the shorts. And I, especially as it relates to development of players, development of people, organizations do have to take more accountability as it relates to that. Now, Anthony Richardson, it's not his fault that he was overdrafted. Did it work out? It did not. And there are plenty of reports, information coming out as to why, directed towards him. But when you as an organization bet on upside, you bet on potential, it is up to you to develop it. And they just were not able to. Putting him on the field as a rookie in the first game was malpractice when you acknowledge how much of growth needed to take place. And Daniel Jones won the job pretty much by default, and it's not going to work out in a way that I believe is going to save the jobs of Shane Steichen or Chris Ballard. I think they're going to be bad, and it's kind of their fault as a reason for why. The Cleveland Browns, they carried 3 onto the roster, 4 technically if you think Deshaun Watson, and that whole situation is a mess. I bet they wish they would have kept Baker Mayfield now, who has rebuilt his career out in Tampa Bay. But because they felt like the grass was greener, they made a desperate move to give a fully guaranteed contract to a quarterback. Forget the question marks, but they gave it to a quarterback who really didn't want to go there. But he took the money, as any person probably would and should, especially in a game like the NFL. But they completely destroyed their organization as a result. Joe Flacco, great to have Joe Flacco back in the building. I don't think that a 40-year-old Joe Flacco, especially with the schedule that they have in that division, is going to do much of anything. And you've got two rookies behind them, one who's undersized and one in Shedeur Sanders, who is viewed as a developmental prospect. So what's Cleveland going to be doing? I feel like all three of those quarterbacks are going to get significant play time. And who knows if Deshaun Watson is back in the fold, what that is going to mean if he decides he wants to try and play as well, because they can't just cut him, at least not without any massive financial repercussions. And then that takes us to the New Orleans Saints, who were going to be bad anyways. I think the Derek Carr experiment kind of proved that, and his retirement more or less finalized that. The New Orleans Saints are a very interesting organization that basically borrow on credit every single year, the way they restructure contracts. But when you look at them from the quarterback standpoint, they handpicked their guy in Tyler Shuck in the second round of this year's draft, and he couldn't beat out the starter from last season in Spencer Rattler, who wasn't picked by this regime. I think that is a red flag, because typically the regime's choice gets first preference, and the fact that they had to make the other decision tells me that maybe something isn't going the way that they hoped that it would go here. So New Orleans is also going to be bad, and we are going to follow up on these three teams because this is a precursor to something that I believe is going to happen with all three of them. When we focus then on the year one and year two quarterback class, so in the first round of this year, we've got Cam Ward and Jackson Dart. I think are in solid enough situations for separate reasons. Cam Ward has flown essentially under the radar, which is insane for a number one overall pick. Tennessee, we're going to have to see. This is an organizational reboot. They have transitioned away from the Mike Vrabel, Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill years, and they're starting over. Now, whether or not it works, that's to be seen. But Cam Ward, all things indicating, are great coming out of the preseason. But again, that's the preseason, and they have a daunting week one task to go up to Denver. The year two class is where there's all the intrigue, right? And you get a better gauge of what things look like in that second year. We saw all of these players play last year with the exception of J.J. McCarthy. And I think J.J. McCarthy, along with Bo Nix, are the two set up for the most success. Caleb Williams, I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains again in this offense. That's also not an easy division. We're going to get into that. Jaden Daniels, you can't go much higher than you did in your first season going to the NFC Championship game. And again, that sets an astronomically high bar. What does that look like in year two with that team, with that coaching staff? You go into Michael Penix. I think Atlanta is very interesting, and I definitely think they're going to be pushing for a wild card spot. Again, the continuity is going to help. They've got a lot of those pieces returning. The Kirk Cousins situation, a little bit weird. Haven't heard a whole lot, but Michael Penix is a starter. Didn't really play much in the preseason, but all things sound pretty positive coming out of Atlanta. That takes us to J.J. McCarthy. Right, J.J. McCarthy. Oh, I skipped Drake May. Drake May, the third overall pick in New England. We're going to get to New England, but they have a long way to go. Like, they have a really long way to go before they are going to really be that team that you feel like is going to be a perennial contender, right? Bad drafting, bad personnel decisions at the end of Belichick's tenure, a disaster last year with Gerard Mayo, which I don't think was entirely his fault, and now a second-year quarterback as they try to do the, quote, modern reboot, which we're actually going to get to in a sec. That takes us to J.J. McCarthy, who I think is in a great position with Minnesota, and I think that is the ideal situation for a quarterback of his stature. And then Bo Nix. I'm going to be honest with you. Denver, depending on how that bracket shakes up in the playoffs, could mess around and find themselves in the AFC Championship game because that defense is legit, and that is the best thing you can surround a young quarterback with, is something to take the pressure off of them. All right? So that's the quarterbacks. What else are we going to be looking at throughout the season? I just talked about the modern reboot with the Patriots. So they're fascinating for that reason. The New England Patriots spent 20 years as the premier franchise in the NFL. Belichick, Brady, Kraft. I've gone on record in saying this. I don't think you can say it was only Brady, it was only Belichick. They fed off of each other. They were the perfect duo to create the perfect system for that franchise. I think what we've seen in recent years is we know one thing for sure is it's not Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft was the ultimate beneficiary of the New England Patriots dynasty, and he can take all the credit for it because at the very top of the food chain, you did allow those parts to come together. But take a look at Kraft's record before Belichick and Brady, right? You had the one Super Bowl appearance, a couple of playoff appearances, but a roughly 500 record. Not a great sequence, right? And then after Belichick, yes, you can say that Belichick doomed that franchise with bad personnel decisions, bad coaching decisions, but at the same time, Robert Kraft also sits atop all of that. He did hire Gerard Mayo and fired him after 1 year, making that mistake and then having to settle for what is going to be now a modern reboot. You are doing Patriots Light with familiar faces, but with a different theme. So in the year that is seeing a ton of reboots and remasters in the TV world, we are going to see it now with the New England Patriots. That takes me to the pending reboot. The Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they're going to make the playoffs, but what is that going to potentially do for the team as a whole? Is this we're going to make the playoffs, it's going to be a potentially positive run, we're going to run it back, or is this a one last ride really for everybody, mainly Aaron Rodgers? And what does that mean for Mike Tomlin going forward? Does he want to be part of what is going to be a structured rebuild, right? They're going to have to solve the quarterback situation going ahead in 2026. Even if Aaron Rodgers come back, they're going to have to get somebody viable in that room. Okay? Going back to the quarterbacks, what we tend to see in a lot of seasons when players get injured, specifically at that position, is there are not enough good quarterbacks to come back in and basically hold the ship steady, whether it's for a couple of weeks or if it's for a season when your quarterback goes down and you're just completely screwed. Gone are the days of when a Kurt Warner would come in and essentially take that team to the Super Bowl and become the answer. Matt Castle almost did it in 2008 with the Patriots. We don't have that now. We don't have a developmental system like we used to in the past, and the inventory of quarterbacks is dropping by the season. But we have a lot of interesting candidates that could be trade bait as we get later into the season. Teams have somebody get injured, or maybe they're just going to take a swing to get a spark, which is a little bit less rare, but there are a couple on the market who could potentially be that. And we've already seen two. Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett, both got traded to Philadelphia and Las Vegas, respectively, indicating that they wanted to upgrade their quarterback backup situations, whether it be injury in Las Vegas or just underperformance in Philadelphia. All right. But Jameis Winston, who is, I believe, the third quarterback on the New York Giants, love him or hate him, he is a great vibe in the locker room and is a serviceable starter in pinch situations. You don't want to hand the keys to your entire season to him, but in a situation where it's like we need to get a couple of games or get down the stretch with him, Jameis Winston can absolutely do it, especially if the team around him can as well. That is a trade candidate. Jarrett Stidham, I actually think might be the top trade candidate, and it's very difficult to glean what you're going to be after preseason performances. But Denver's roster is deep. That second team performed very well, and for a team that is potentially looking to amplify their situation, their backup situation, especially if a quarterback goes down, Jarrett Stidham would be a prime trade candidate. Russell Wilson, again, on the New York Giants, is another one. If it comes down to it, between Jameis and Russ, I believe the Giants would be willing to let Russ go unless somebody wanted Jameis and were willing to pay. All right, but Wilson, again, say what you want. He's a Super Bowl champion. He had a really good run in Seattle. If you as a team need a boost to get into the playoffs because your starter went down, ineffective, could be an option later in the season, especially as the trade deadline has been extended. Kirk Cousins is absolutely a fascinating one, and a lot of people have been linking him to the Los Angeles Rams in the event that Matt Stafford's back doesn't heal the way that it is supposed to. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Again, I think Cousins is a candidate in the event that there's an injury, and whether or not a team feels like that could be the thing that continues their push into the playoffs. You tend to see that a lot with coaches who are on the hot seat, right? Coaches, GMs on the hot seat. They need to make the playoffs. They got to get a push. Let's make this trade. Let's see what happens. All right. And the last one, he just signed an extension, but Tyson Bagent in Chicago. I don't see him being traded, but I also don't not see teams giving a call to Chicago if they need somebody who can come in and start. The Bears obviously thought enough of him to give him an extension. Ben Johnson is an offensive coach who clearly knows quarterbacks. That is the type of stuff that gets ears to perk up around the league. And if he has an opportunity to start and a team wants to give up compensation for him, I see that potentially happening as well. So that is a lot of options. That is more than what typically exists in the past. All of these players, most of them, Wilson, Cousins, Hal, Pickett, they were starters in the past, so they weren't necessarily on the trade market as backups. But for a league that generally suffers with quarterback play after the starters go down, this is a good crop of potential trade options in the event of an injury. Okay? Staying on that theme, the teams who are going to be in the market for the quarterbacks next year, right? So this could be trade, this could be free agents, this could be draft. Teams who are going to need to upgrade their situation. I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to potentially be in that boat. And I think that because they just got rid of Micah Parsons, they are trading for draft picks for the future. Dak Prescott's on a very expensive contract, and if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to have to do something, right? And when you look at how these organizations function, you look at what a good quarterback class is going to be next year, draft picks are the way to do it. Don't be surprised if Dallas finds themselves sniffing around a quarterback in the first or second round. New Orleans, we covered them. They don't have a great situation. That situation is going to crater their season. They're going to be in the market again next year. The Arizona Cardinals are a fascinating one as well. They have been middle of the pack for the last couple of years. They've been kind of rebuilding this situation with Jonathan Gannon, Monty Ossenford at the GM spot. But what happens if this year they are once again in that 7-10 to 9-8 range and they miss out on the playoffs? Kyler Murray is also an expensive contract. Have they hit their ceiling with that player? That is going to be the question that they're going to have to ask themselves. And if they miss the playoffs again, what's going to happen with that coaching staff? I don't see everybody getting canned, but it is very difficult in the NFL if you've missed the playoffs your first 2 seasons that you are granted a 4th season after missing it your 3rd as well. The New York Jets will likely be in the quarterback market. I do think Justin Fields is going to do well in this system, especially because it's going to be very run heavy. But how sustainable is it? I think after a certain point, you do realize this is what a player is. And while there might be some improvement, is it going to be game changing? I don't think the Jets are going to bottom out, which is typically what happens with them when they get a new regime in. They do overperform, screwing themselves out of one of the quarterbacks in the next class, saddling them with their current situation. But they do have a pretty good core, and they will be able to potentially flip some of those assets to get higher up in the draft if they really want to. Cleveland, Indianapolis, we've talked about both of them, like New Orleans. They're going to be in the market. The Las Vegas Raiders are likely going to be in the market, right? Trading for Kenny Pickett solves their backup situation while Aiden O'Connell heals up from his wrist injury. But Geno Smith is 35. There's familiarity with Pete Carroll. That whole situation is designed to be stable. They're not really thinking right now in the long term, but they are going to be in the market for sure in the next year or 2. This one is the surprise, and I think this is the one that's going to be the most jarring for some people. I think Seattle's going to be in the market again next year, and I think they're going to be aggressively in the market. I don't really believe that Seattle is going to be as good as some think. I think they are the 4th place team in that division. I think Sam Darnold is a technical downgrade from Geno Smith, and they're just a curious team. We're going to learn a lot about this team, but they're going to be in for it. And I think Sam Darnold in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell is great. I think Sam Darnold in Seattle, and I believe the OC is Clint Kubiak. We saw that played out in New Orleans last year. Hot 2-0 start and then nosedive the rest of the season. I think Miami is also going to have some issues this year. I think Tua is solid enough in Mike McDaniel's system, but there are clear limitations, and his health is a concern. If things go bad this year, which I think they are, be prepared for a reboot, and that could mean everybody, including the quarterback. And then Pittsburgh, they're going to have to be in the quarterback market by default. Aaron Rodgers has significantly less time than Moore, and eventually they're just going to have to invest the resources to go in on a young quarterback that could be their future. Okay. Oh, I need tea. We're gonna take a break on that one real quick. All right. Travis Hunter. I think this is an interesting storyline purely because it's a two-way player, and we haven't seen that in the NFL. Now, how viable is it? We're going to see, and I think a lot of this is also going to be determined on whether or not the Jacksonville Jaguars have returned to a level of functionality as an organization with the coaching staff. Liam Cohen is there, but it took a lot to get him there. If you remember, the Jaguars had Trent Baalke as their GM, and no coach was taking that job with him running personnel, and ultimately they fired Baalke, hired Cohen, and tried to get things in place. I think they gave up a lot to get Travis Hunter, more than they probably needed to given the state of their team, but we're going to have to see. The first real two-way player that we've seen in the NFL since the dark ages. But it's going to be a fascinating situation to see how they deploy Travis Hunter. The preseason, not a good barometer to know how that's going to go. The team that rises too early. Every year, we've got a team that outperforms the expectations, and it kind of speeds the clock up for what they're going to be. In 2021, that was the Patriots with Mac Jones, thinking that they found their guy, and then things collapsed. In 2022, it was the Jets. They really got off hot and then cratered at the end, sparking a trade for Aaron Rodgers in 23. In 2023, it was the Houston Texans. C.J. Stroud took a team that was picking second in the draft, got into the playoffs. Last year, it was the Commanders, with Jaden Daniels going to the NFC Championship game. So who is it going to be in 2025? The candidates typically are younger teams with younger quarterbacks. And the only team that really fit that this year were the Tennessee Titans. Honorable mention to the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers, potentially for outperforming what their expectations are. But we are going to go with the Titans. And the reason why is, again, Cam Ward has, by all accounts, done everything needed to be a very good quarterback in the NFL. There's going to be bumps and bruises. The team definitely needs to upgrade itself in some key areas as well, and we're going to see this throughout the year. Cam Ward is not going to carry this team to the playoffs, but what Cam Ward can do is get this team up to second place in the AFC South, which would likely only be 7 or 8 wins to be right behind Houston. And that is going to set things up for, okay, could the Titans make a playoff, not run, but a playoff pitch in 2026 with some additions and potentially shake it up, maybe win the division over Houston? That is what the conversation for the Titans is going to be going into 2026. The team most likely to disappoint. I had 4. Chicago, Jacksonville, Green Bay, but I settled on the Washington Commanders. The comp that I have for them are the 2009 and 2010 Jets. You get to the championship game with a rookie quarterback. The coaching staff's a little similar. I would say you've got a defensive coach that's got some limitations up at the top, good offensive coordinator with a philosophy in place, and a well-functioning team around them. The reason why I think the Commanders are going to disappoint, though, it is very hard to repeat that success in back-to-back years. The Jets almost really didn't do it in their first year. They got a gift from the Colts to basically spark their last couple of wins into the playoffs when the Colts passed on an undefeated season. And then in the second year, they were able to capitalize again off of the Colts and avenge the AFC Championship loss the year before, and then that sparked a couple of wins, a couple of upsets into the AFC Championship game. With the Commanders, they're not better than Philly. They are the second best team in their division. I think a healthy Detroit this year would beat them. I think Tampa Bay last year lost off of a field goal in the wild card game to the Commanders. There were a lot of close wins for Washington last year. Philly being one at the end of the year, that Chicago Hail Mary at the other one. Those are the kind of things that define seasons. I have questions about Dan Quinn as a coach based off of his time in Atlanta. I have other questions about Kliff Kingsbury based off of his time at Texas Tech and Arizona. And I think because defensive coordinators are so adept at game planning and understanding, I just don't see a pathway, certainly not to the NFC Championship game again, but it's going to be a struggle for this team to make the playoffs. And I think people are going to be in for a rude awakening, even with the Deebo Samuel upgrade, Terry McLaurin getting paid, and buffering the offensive line a bit too. We need to temper our expectations because that was the highest that it probably could have gone. And I don't think that that's realistic to think that it's going to get back to that point for the second year in a row, especially with the NFC field improving the way that it has. The team with the most questions at the end of the season is going to be the Arizona Cardinals. Again, we talked about this with the quarterback situation. If Arizona goes 9-8, 8-9, misses the playoffs, and they're the third place team in the division, where do they go? Because that was basically them last year. And the year before that, they were trying to get this thing rebuilt with Kyler Murray coming off of a knee injury. You have to go somewhere, right? And I don't think running it back for a fourth year in a row is going to be the option. It's going to be the choice that's going to satisfy everybody, whether that looks like competition at the quarterback position, making a trade, making a splash, figuring something out, because this regime is not going to be able to make it again after a fourth year of not making the playoffs. I don't know if everyone's going to stay, if everyone's going to be out, but I think Arizona is going to have a lot of questions that they're going to want to ask and want answered if they miss the playoffs again this season. The organization that's going to have the most questions at the end of the year, I had 4: Dallas, Cincinnati, New England, and Miami. It's going to be the Dallas Cowboys. And for some of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, the quarterback situation, we're going to have to see. The coaching situation, we're going to have to see. I think Mike McCarthy being out this year, and if Dallas definitely struggles, I think it's going to elevate his status as an option for 2026. More on that in a second. And there's just a lot that's going on. The defense is absolutely worse, and that was the strength of the team. The offense, 2 really high-paid players and parts that kind of go around it. Dallas has drafted well enough over the last 10 years, couple of misses the last couple of seasons. But I think we're going to be asking a lot of questions, especially if Micah Parsons has an all-pro type year in Green Bay as well, as the organization that's going to have a lot of things to answer for as a whole, not just the team, the players, and all that. All right, one more in this category. We took a lot of time up here, is the black hole game. Every year, and it usually happens in the first 2 weeks of the season, where you get a team that inexplicably loses to a lesser team. And we see this start to have ramifications as the playoffs start to get closer. Last year, Cincinnati dropped a game to the New England Patriots at home. And that game is essentially what screwed them out of making the playoffs because they beat the teams they needed to at the end. They beat Denver. That burned them, right? So what is that going to be this year? I have 2 earmarked in week 1. Arizona, New Orleans, and this is going to be where we're going to see New Orleans potentially silence their critics, beat a team that is supposed to be pretty solid, and then it's going to collapse from there. We're going to see Arizona inexplicably lose to New Orleans, and that could be something that could be the difference between that 7th and final playoff spot. The other one, Washington and the New York Giants, a week 1 game where I think the Giants are going to be good, serviceable, and functional. And I think Washington is going to potentially trip themselves up in that one because the Giants have an excellent defense. They're going to be able to get after Jaden Daniels, and that could be the difference in deciding whether or not Washington, forget the division, is able to make the playoffs. So be on the lookout for those 2 as the black hole games. All right? More tea. We're going to jump into the coaching landscape again. we focus a lot on ownership, quarterbacks, coaches in the NFL are a very fascinating topic because when you look at how a lot of teams are put together, it is heavily rooted in the identity of that coach. And when a coach gets fired, usually means upending that entire structure and philosophy. All right. On average, there are 6 to 8 openings a year. A quarter of the league about turns over every single season. When I look at coaching vacancies, potential vacancies, I do it from 2 perspectives. One, having coached at a variety of levels, never at this level, and understanding the difficulty that goes into putting a team together. And then not only that part, but coaching it and getting it to a level of functionality that allows you to make a run into the playoffs. It is not easy, and we don't always see what's happening on the inside in any situation. I also do not like to call for coaches' jobs. These are speculations. These are predictions. I do not want to see any of these coaches lose their jobs because that ruins not just their livelihood, right? But you've got a lot of lower level assistants who then are scrambling to find work. So there are implications, and we don't want to get into the habit as coaches, as former coaches, calling for people's jobs unless it is absolutely something egregious, like like what Urban Meyer pulled off in his first year. That one I think was warranted. All right. So disclaimer aside, who is not on this list? The Bengals and the Steelers are not going to be on this list for 2 reasons. The Bengals, they do not pay coaches not to coach. Zach Taylor's contract is through next season. And I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers are ever going to fire Mike Tomlin. Now, the only scenario in which I could see Mike Tomlin going somewhere is if they mutually decided that he didn't want to be part of a rebuild. They found him a home elsewhere. But for this argument, neither of those teams are going to be on the list. Who is on the list? The Indianapolis Colts. Again, they have screwed themselves with that quarterback situation. I don't think it's just the coach. I think it's the GM too, who failed to put anything substantial around that team since Andrew Luck retired. So they've gone through a couple of quarterbacks. They've gone through 2 coaches. No longer going to be a thing. No longer going to work. All right. So we are going to move into the Giants, who I think they bought themselves time. I think John Mayer is trying to be patient. And with Jackson Dart, it would almost be malpractice to get rid of Brian Daboll and Joe Shane after this year. I don't think they will unless the season absolutely craters and we have visible proof that Jackson Dart is in the future. This quarterback class coming out was so polarizing that you are going to have to give the coaches that selected these quarterbacks at least a couple of years to figure out viability. So I think the seat for Brian Daboll, a little bit warm, but not hot. The Browns, that one is absolutely hot. And depending on where it all goes, if it nosedives, I think Kevin Stefanski could be out. Andrew Berry, that is a different story. They do have draft picks to work with, but there's a lot of blood on everyone's hands, from Deshaun Watson to how this situation with the quarterbacks was handled with the rookies to just not really having a good plan, especially with Baker Mayfield thriving down in Tampa Bay. The Cardinals, I've talked about them a couple of times. Again, it's going to be a question mark to see if they narrowly miss the playoffs. Do they make a change? If it's a bad season, I absolutely see them making a change. The Dolphins. Things could get weird in Miami. I think with what we're seeing out of there, they didn't get better. They've gotten rid of pieces that they felt like were no longer their culture fits, Jalen Ramsey being one of them. Tyreek Hill wanted out. I'm worried for the Dolphins. I think that has the potential to be a really, really bad situation. I think the charm of Mike McDaniel is starting to wear off in that market, right? He's an interesting guy, definitely a very different vibe of an NFL head coach, really good offensive mind, but it's wearing thin, and you can kind of see it in the media, right? These last 3 I'm lumping all together, and I don't think all 3 of these are going to happen. But I do think the likelihood that one of them happens is pretty high, and that is the collective between the Bills, the Ravens, and the Green Bay Packers, and they're all for really different reasons. So we have seen in a lot of instances where if as a coach, your team fails to get over the hump after a certain amount of times, they're just going to bounce you. Marty Schottenheimer was a good example back in 2006, I believe. Chargers went 14-2. There were some other issues there, but it didn't work. The Broncos in 2014 fired John Fox after a Super Bowl appearance and 4 straight division titles. They made a change because they didn't advance past the divisional playoff game. It's a tough call for organizations to make when you have had a lot of success with a coach, but sometimes you do need something different if you are unable to do it. The Bills are a candidate because Josh Allen is with a defensive coach, and defensive coaches are defensive by nature, right? They tend to lean conservative regardless of what they have, and at times it can hold their teams back. I think Sean McDermott is an excellent coach, and if he were to be let go in any way, teams would probably fire their coaches to have him as a coach. So be on the lookout for that, especially if Buffalo fails to advance in certain situations. The Baltimore Ravens, I think, are less likely, but also still a possibility. And I think based off of some past rumors where John Harbaugh potentially was going to be looking at a team like Denver. This was floating around about 10 years ago, right? And this was a little bit before they got Lamar Jackson. I think that would be the wrong move. But again, you just never know where it's going to go. And sometimes a reset for these coaches is also a good thing. This isn't a they can't coach. This is maybe I just need to go somewhere else and just change the energy a little bit. The Packers, I think, could be the most likely. And the reason why I think they're the most likely, look at what just happened in their organizational structure. They just got a new CEO in Ed Policy. And whenever you get somebody brand new like that, they like to have their own spin on things. You pair that with Jordan Love being the answer for now, them being in a tough division and just trading for Micah Parsons. They just gave up a lot to push themselves into the contending window. If something were to happen where Green Bay misses the playoffs, could get interesting, right? And again, I think Matt LaFleur would also be one of those coaches where if he were fired, all three of these coaches, if any of them were let go, teams would probably get rid of their coach to bring one of these 3 coaches in. I'm not predicting that any of these 3 will happen. I'm just saying to be on the lookout for it. The seats aren't hot for them, but organizations do make some very curious decisions when they feel like they have to. Okay? More tea. We are going way over. We typically do not stick around this long, but we're getting a lot of good stuff here. All right. So if coaches were to get fired, retired, whatever, we have coaching vacancies. Who is coming in to fill some of those, right? It's usually the hot coordinators that are finding their way up the pipeline. Brian Flores, for whatever's happening with that lawsuit, I believe is going to start getting interviews again, especially after another strong performance from that Minnesota defense. They were nasty last year, and proof that he is able to really galvanize a team. I also think that he's learned, right, from past mistakes. Although I think firing him in Miami was the wrong decision, he brought toughness and accountability. And I think you saw it also with Vic Fangio after they got rid of him, that maybe that unit is just a little bit soft, right? But Brian Flores should absolutely get some looks. Vance Joseph in Denver, I believe, is going to get some looks because, again, that defense is going to be ridiculously good this year after being a top unit last year. Both previous head coaches, right? So that does help them. It's going to be about what did they learn? How are they going to be different this time? Vance Joseph in Denver was undone by the quarterback position, right? Not being able to get that right. And that'll sink your season. That'll sink your career. But I think he's going to get looks. Kliff Kingsbury got looks this cycle. I think he'll get them again next year. Jay Daniels is going to perform well, regardless of whatever else happens around that team. So I think he's going to get looks. Zac Robinson, Atlanta's offensive coordinator, going to get looks if Michael Penix looks good this year, right? That's just going to happen. Josh Grizzard, Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator, is just in there because it seems like for the last 3 or 4 cycles, every offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay has gotten a head coaching job somewhere else. So why not continue on with the trend. I went into the triumvirate of McDermott, Harbaugh, and LaFleur. If any of them are gone, teams will absolutely bring them in over whatever coach they currently have. Mike McCarthy is a free agent. I think if Dallas' season goes very poorly, then we're going to see the value of a Mike McCarthy, and he's going to get a chance to coach his third team, right? A rarity in the NFL, getting a chance to coach a third team in 2026. 3 wild cards, though. I've got 3 that we want to focus on, and they're coming out of college. Ryan Day. Ryan Day's an excellent coach. Ryan Day, had he not won a championship last year, potentially would have been out last year because that is how rabid that Ohio State fan base would have been. I don't think the university would have done it, but you would have had a lot of clamoring and the pressure would have been dialed up this year. Winning a national championship really takes the heat off. And the only way I see Ryan Day leaving Ohio State for the NFL is if he genuinely wants to. He wants to do the Harbaugh thing. He wants to come to the NFL to take his crack there. I don't know how possible it is, but I know that teams are going to be calling, especially as this NIL stuff gets more difficult. Again, he's got his national championship. Maybe this is the time. Marcus Freeman. And I know people are going to be wondering why after especially last night's loss. But look at one team in particular, and that is the Green Bay Packers. Their new CEO, Ed Policy, is a Notre Dame alum. And those connections are the kinds of things that create bridges for coaches to make moves. I don't see Marcus Freeman leaving Notre Dame, but if anything were to happen in Green Bay that would free that slot up, it certainly would create a pathway for him to do so. And then Steve Sarkisian. Now, again, coming out of yesterday's loss, people are going to probably be asking why, what's the thought process here? He does have NFL ties. He's a really good offensive mind. But again, a lot of these college coaches, they didn't sign up for the NIL portion of the college football coaching. They're dealing with it. They're navigating it. But it does add a different layer of stress here. And if there is a pathway where a team wants Sark to come in, be their head coach, they've got a solid situation coming in. Maybe one of these teams with some additional draft picks, right? You've got a couple of teams next year who've got a couple of draft picks. Could it happen? We can't rule it out, right? And not, again, that these coaches are going to go anywhere, but the conversation absolutely has to be had that they could go somewhere. And, right, those are the ones who are just at the top of mind for me, all right? Okay, you ready for the fun stuff? Because I'm ready for the fun stuff. Division standings. We're getting to the end of things here. I'm going to try to get this done in under an hour, right? So we are at, and we're right now in the mid 42-ish range, 43 range minute-wise. But division standings. So let's take a look at this. NFC East, Philadelphia, Washington, Giants, Cowboys, right? These were all fluid really up until this morning when I got things recorded. I think this is about where we're going to be with all of it. So Philly's going to win. Washington second place. The Giants, I think, are going to leapfrog Dallas because of that defense, and I think Dallas is going to bottom out, and they're going to be the fourth place team in that division. NFC North, Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay, Chicago. I think it's a very tough division. I think Chicago's going to have some growing pains. I still think the two best teams in the division are Detroit and Minnesota. And I think Green Bay is going to be really not distant behind those two, but they are going to be behind them both, which, again, kind of leads into some of what I was saying earlier. The NFC South, I think Tampa Bay is going to win it again. I think the addition of Emeka Egbuka, that defense is solid. They are just a stable franchise. More power to them. They're going to win that division. Atlanta's going to be right there behind them. I think a few growing pains with Michael Penix, but enough that they're going to be, especially late in the year, competing for that final playoff spot. Carolina, we're going to see growth, but we're not going to see it all the way there. New Orleans is going to be comfortably in last place. The Seattle Seahawks are going to be in last place in the NFC West. I think Arizona's going to be in third place. But that tie up at the top, I originally had the Los Angeles Rams winning this division and going all the way to the Super Bowl. Matt Stafford's back is scaring me a lot. So maybe I'll regret this, but I think San Francisco wins the division, and I think the Rams find themselves in second place because of health. On to the AFC. So AFC East, pretty straightforward. The Bills are going to run that division. And this isn't my Jets bias coming out, but they do have the second best roster in that division. They're going to be the second place team. And that second place team could be 7-10, right? I think the Patriots are going to be right behind them in that 6-11 to 7-10 range. They just have a lot of work to do. They're going to be better. They're going to be more competitive. They're going to be in the mix enough, but they're not a great team. And then Miami, again, I think they're going to be really bad this year. AFC North. Baltimore's winning that division. I do think Pittsburgh has some run in them. That team is always solid. I don't think Aaron Rodgers makes them worse. They're going to be in second place. Cincinnati, the offense is going to be enough to keep them in games, but I think they're going to mirror a lot of what the mid-2010s Saints are after Bountygate. Exceptional offense, awful defense, and they're going to set a lot of records on the front end, but they are going to miss the playoffs because they just can't stop anybody. Cleveland, again, I think Cleveland's going to be fourth place in that division because of their quarterback situation and schedule. AFC South. Houston is going to win that division. They're the best team, best quarterback, best coaching staff. They're solid. Offensive line is a question, but we're going to have to see there. Tennessee, second place team. I said that they're going to be the fast risers. They're going to get a lot of good traction that's going to give them momentum going into 2026. Jacksonville, I don't think much of them, but they're going to be serviceable, but they're going to be in third place in that division behind Tennessee. Indianapolis is going to be in last place. AFC West. Kansas City, they are going to win that division. Denver is going to be right behind them. If you had to ask me what's going to happen, I think they are going to split. They will beat KC in Denver. They will lose to KC on the road. Kansas City is going to win the rest of their division games, right? Maybe they'll have a scare, but they're going to be 5-1 in the division. I think Denver's going to be 4-2 in the division. I think the other loss is going to come to the Chargers on the road. LA is going to be the third place team. Vegas is going to be the fourth place team. And can we just for a moment take a moment to appreciate the level of coaching that's going to be in the AFC West this year? I mean, that might be the most stacked coaching lineup that we've ever seen in NFL history between Reed, Harbaugh, Peyton, and Pete Carroll. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right.
All right, before we get too deep, we've got the
two more things to touch on: the draft order and the playoff field. The top 5 in the 2026 NFL draft going from 5 to 1. I think Seattle's going to be picking in the top 5, and I outlined some of those reasons above. I don't trust the quarterback situation. I don't trust the coordinator situation. I just don't see how much better they are from last year when a lot of other teams got better, right? I think they potentially are going to be 1-5 in the division. They're going to get swept by LA, San Francisco, and they're going to split with Arizona. That is not a good recipe for having success. The Browns are going to be number 4. The Colts are going to be number 3. Dolphins 2. New Orleans Saints number 1. That is going to be the top 5 order in the 2026 NFL draft. All right. Now, let's close this thing out. The playoff field in the AFC is going to be 1 seed Baltimore, 2 seed Kansas City, 3 seed Buffalo, 4 seed Houston. So those are our division winners. 5 seed Denver, 6 seed Pittsburgh, 7th seed the Los Angeles Chargers. In the NFC, 1 seed Philadelphia, 2 seed San Francisco. I think they are going to get it over the Rams. 3 seed Detroit, 4 seed Tampa Bay, winning the division again. 5 seed Rams, 6 seed Vikings, 7 seed the Atlanta Falcons. I did leave the Commanders out of the playoffs. Again, go back to that black hole game and just a tougher season overall with that unit. All right, they're not going to be bad, but they are going to miss out just slightly. So let's look at the bracket. In the wild card round, Kansas City is going to beat the Chargers, especially at home. That's going to be a cold game. Don't necessarily trust Herbert in the playoffs. I think that's going to create some questions going forward. This is where the upset is going to come in. I do think Pittsburgh would beat Buffalo in the playoffs for the reason that Aaron Rodgers does have a little bit left in him. He was playing good football last year, and I think him being in the playoffs would be energizing for a squad that has not been there in a while. Buffalo also, knowing that Kansas City would be ahead next week, would look ahead to that game, potentially trapping them in this one. Pittsburgh is close. They're not afraid of inclement weather. They can run the ball. I could see Pittsburgh winning that game. Denver would beat Houston. Now, I think this would flip what happens in the regular season. Denver does go to Houston earlier in the year. I could see them losing that and then returning the favor in the wild card round in the playoffs. NFC side, San Francisco would beat Atlanta. It'd be a great story for the Falcons to make it. I do see San Francisco as that more seasoned team as the 2 seed who would be able to pull it off. Upset again, Minnesota over Detroit. Detroit has had a very good run over the last couple of years. Division opponents are tricky. I could absolutely see a sweeping situation. Detroit gets them in the regular season as J.J. McCarthy is really getting his legs under him as a full-time starter. It is very hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. And Minnesota, defensively, is competitive. I think J.J. would play better in some of those tight situations, having been on the national championship stage. I could see that upset happening. And then Tampa Bay over L.A., and this is going to be purely health-related. Tampa Bay is a solid team, consistent, who would be able to do it. And L.A., if things are not clicking, if Matt Stafford's a little bit banged up, that's the reason why they would be in that 5-seed spot and the reason why they would be going home in the first round, potentially putting them into the mix for a QB next year too. Divisional round, Baltimore over Pittsburgh. Be a great story. Baltimore is the best team in the AFC, and they would knock the Steelers off. Great run, good story. It's over. Denver would beat Kansas City. And again, I said that Denver could mess around and find themselves in the AFC Championship game if the bracket broke right, and this would be the bracket breaking right. If they face the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, I see them losing. If Denver, for any reason, finds themselves with home field advantage in any capacity, that's going to be a problem. Kansas City, I think, would get tripped up in the AFC divisional game against Denver because Denver, they've got nothing to lose. The pressure would be more on the Chiefs to get back to the AFC Championship game versus if they played in the AFC Championship game, the Chiefs would have the experience at their side and know what this feels like. This is advantageous for Denver. Denver is not afraid of the Chiefs. They haven't been since Sean Payton got there, took them out when they had Russ, played them tough throughout the times, and forget the end of the season last year when they blew them out 38-0. They were a blocked field goal away from sweeping them, and that could have changed the entire course of the season. So I think Denver would beat Kansas City if they played in the divisional round, setting them up to go to Baltimore for the AFC Championship game. Philadelphia would beat Minnesota. I don't see a dome team going up to Philly winning in whatever those conditions are. Tampa Bay over San Francisco. Again, this is somewhat health-related. San Francisco does have some depth issues at receiver. Brandon Ayuk will be back mid-year. Christian McCaffrey's got to stay healthy, and that team is definitely getting older. Robert Saleh is going to make a great impact on the defense. You see all the parts they drafted. But it's tough to get back, right? Seasons are long. Tampa Bay is a very good team, and on the road in San Francisco, I don't think they would have that much of a problem going up against that team. So I will pick them to beat San Francisco, putting them in Philly for the championship game. So now we're here. Am I going to be so bold to pick Denver to beat the Ravens? I am not. Baltimore would beat Denver at home, setting them up to go to the Super Bowl for the first time since 2012 and the first time in the Lamar Jackson era. Philadelphia would likely beat Tampa Bay, sending them to the Super Bowl as well. And then we've got it. A Philadelphia-Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl in which I think the Ravens finally do it, get their first crown, and it's a great story. These are the two deepest teams in the NFL. Now, can Philadelphia do it again, right? Repeating is very difficult. We saw the Chiefs pull it off, but it is a very difficult task to win 2 in a row. They could be in for a little bit of a down year. I don't think it could be more of a grind for them to get all the way back. But when they do get back, I think that's where it's going to catch up to them. Baltimore is going to get them, and Baltimore is going to get Lamar Jackson's first ring, the validation that comes with being the best player in the NFL. So that's it. We made it all the way to the end. We will be back to our regular programming probably next week. There'll be a couple of articles that go up this week as well, but I'm just happy that football is back. It is going to be nice to spend the Sundays doing the thing that we all love doing so much, which is just watching our favorite teams, getting into the debates and watching the conversations take place the following week. Again, all this is speculative. I went over a lot of different stuff. Be on the lookout in season.
We're going to touch on
Mainly the coaching stuff, the changes, do some vibe checks periodically just to kind of look inside of how those organizations might be functioning based off of what is being said, reported, and just have a good time with it. So, longest one that I have done on video for sure. We kept it under an hour, so we will take it. Check the timestamps in the comments if there are sections that you would want to go to. But as always, if anything resonates, give a like, subscribe, and engage. We will see you next time. Happy football, everybody. Have a good one.